That guy over there is Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. Joins us once a week. I would think, boys and girls, that you might have a question or two for him. Let's find out. 479-1160, 349-WCCS. The first really exciting day of the year comes on April the 13th. What's that tell you about what kind of weather we've had? But people sort of have a spring in their step today.
Yes, as they should.
It's spring weather, and we're certainly appreciative of that. Let's take a caller this morning for Mr. Pollock. Good morning.
Good morning.
What can we do for you?
Hey, I was wondering, I did not get to trim my shrubs last fall, and is it a bad idea to do them on a day like today?
What kind of shrub? Stumper.
I'm not sure what they are. They're ornamental.
All right. Do they have leaves on now? Are they evergreens? No. They're deciduous. Okay. They lost their leaves in the fall.
Yes.
All right. That narrows it down a little bit. Do they flower?
No.
Okay. So they'll get leaves on them, and that's pretty much, so they might be like a privet hedge or something like that?
Yes, a couple of them are red and a couple of them are green.
Okay. They don't have spines on them, do they?
No.
No. Okay. Anything that's non-flowering, all the flowering plants, we try to group and do those depending on their flower season. So if they're spring bloomers, then we'll work on those right after they flower in the spring. Material like you're talking about, where it's just foliage, can often be used for that burst of color of the foliage, or it's just a screening plant or a hedge plant. Those we have more flexibility on. So if you didn't get them done last fall, you could still do those now prior to growth, and depending on whether you're shearing them or just selectively pruning them or removing some branches to thin them out and open them up a little bit, you can do that now.
Okay. And how about grapevines?
Because it's not going to hurt the plant. The plant's pretty much made it through winter now. And there's a number of plants just starting, the buds are starting to swell, or they've already opened up a little bit. I know some of the lilacs and things with the warm temperatures overnight and expected for the next couple of days, things are really going to start to pop, and then we're going to cool off again.
But he asked about grapevines.
And grapevines, we're in the time frame now where you could work on those, especially if they're the like Concord grapes, which are really hardy. If we get into some of the table grapes and the wine grapes, then those, depending on the variety, can be much more sensitive to cold, and we might want to wait a little bit on those. But the Concords, you could work on those now.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
There you go. And 479-1160 is the number to call, 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227 if you have a question for Bob. When you are talking about trimming those grapevines back, you can go pretty drastic on those, can't you?
Yes, you
right
can.
Back down to the knuckle.
Yes, you can. and probably should. Because we're trying to encourage new growth on those, new vines to grow. And if we leave too much on there, and that can happen more often with an arbor type of situation versus a vertical trellis situation, because of the vertical trellis, there's not as much room there. You're trying to train those canes on the wires or on that structure. With the arbor, that's a bigger structure, so you either need more plants, but you still need to get in there and prune and thin those out and try to encourage new growth, but not leave it so that it's a jungle.
Yeah, okay. All right. Let's get our next caller. Good morning.
Hi, Bob. Speaking of jungles, 2 years ago, it was slowly developing. I have a blackberry patch, and 2 years ago it was so
thick.
Right, exactly. Thank you. that you couldn't get into the bushes and the berries in the center. You could only pick it from the outside. So I cut it after it fruited. I cut it down and figured I had made the right choice. And I knew last year I wouldn't get any berries, but I thought at least I'll get the patch growing the way I want it. Well, that didn't happen. It grew up and fell over and so forth, and I was back to square one again, and I didn't get any berries. So this year, I know that I can't cut it all down, or I'm not going to get any fruit. And so, what would you advise on these blackberry bushes that'll probably grow 6 feet or 7 feet in length, and then they bend over because they're so heavy, and then you can only pick them from the outside?
Yes, and that's exactly what happens to those. They become a thicket. Once they get established, they really take off and grow, and then they also have the ability to, as those canes get long and weep over and touch the ground again, they can root and start new plants,
right.
And then that even worsens the situation and makes it a thicket that you have to weave through. So we usually, with the berries, try to plant those in rows because it makes it a little easier. You can get access all the way around the plant, or at least on either side of it, to do some of that pruning as well as do the harvesting. So on those plants, we've got a perennial root system. All right, so it's going to send up new shoots every year. And then it has the canes are annual. Last year, you would have gotten new growth. And this year, those vegetative canes, or canes that just had leaves on, will now bear fruit this year. They'll flower and fruit. Once they fruit, they die.
Right.
So you can go in and prune the dead ones out. And really, you can do that at the end of the harvest season to get those out of there, because they'll die back on their own. And then you still have the new canes that aren't bearing yet growing there. And you can actually tip those back a couple times during the summer, which shortens them up, but also allows them to send out new buds and get side branches. And then that's where the fruit you can get.
And the fruit will grow on the side branches.
Yes. So you'll actually get more fruit and better fruit by doing it that way. And that way you can control the size. And then during the dormant season before growth starts again, you can actually thin some of the canes out. Pick the strongest, maybe 5 to 8 main canes, the biggest, heaviest, most durable ones. Keep those, and then clean out the rest of it down at the base, at the crown of the plant. Thin them all the way down to the base, so that you've got a nice plant. Try to distribute those canes that are coming out from the crown, so they're going different directions, and there's enough space between them, so that when you do tip them, and you can cut them back now on the tops a little bit to shorten that up. So maybe they'll only be 4 to 4.5 feet high.
Okay.
Which helps make it more manageable. It's easier to get in there. It's easier to harvest the fruit when it's kind of at chest level versus having to reach up in the air to grab them. But
yes.
that has to be done on an annual basis. Otherwise, just as you said, then they just keep growing and making new plants, and then it just keeps getting thicker and thicker, and eventually some of that dies out on its own because it doesn't get enough. It's too thick, doesn't get enough light, and the quality of fruit is reduced as well. And then you said they were weeping and moving around. Oftentimes we'll try to train those on a trellis system, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be string or binder twine or thin rope, or it can be a more permanent structure with wooden posts and wire,
right?
High tensile strength wire. And so you can build that trellis and then kind of train that. You can tie those canes up to that trellis. That gives them support, and you can go from there. So you can get as much into it as you want to.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
There you go. 7:56 in the morning, 4 minutes away from the top of the hour. People are getting outdoors, aren't they?
Yeah, all of a sudden.
You're starting to do the assessments now.
We could have been out a little bit before,
Yeah.
doing some things, but still it was very wet here, very wet.
Yeah.
And still there's moisture in the ground. The ground's starting to dry out a bit now on top, just with a little bit of sun and that wind helps a lot.
In just a minute that we have left here, talk a bit about weed control on your lawn before it starts to really green up. Anything we can do in that respect?
Well, there are weeds that are actively growing now. Some of our winter annual weeds, chickweed's an example of that, and there's some other perennials as well that can be nuisance pests. But anything that's green and growing, you can, as much as possible, try to spot treat those.
Okay.
So if it's a broadleaf plant, then just need to pick the right material to match up that'll control broadleaf weeds, and you can spot treat those. And usually a liquid material that you mix up with water and spray on will be very effective at that.
People are freaking out already over can we control these dandelions before they get out?
And you can knock them back. You may not completely kill them. Part of the reason, the best time to get those perennials is in the fall, because they're going to start to go dormant. They take the material down into the root system, and you get a better control. Now everything's going opposite. The energy that was stored over winter is heading up, making new growth. So oftentimes we'll burn off the top of the plant, but it won't completely kill it. It may come back, but you've stunted it. Gives time for the grass to come in, compete a little bit more with it, and suppress the growth.
Give it a black eye.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.